Most of us have heard about the health benefits of proper nutrition and regular exercise, but making these things a priority, identifying the proper guidelines, and actually following through with them in our daily lives is often a challenge. For type 1 and type 2 diabetics, prioritizing nutrition and exercise in our lives is critical to maintain a favorable health outlook. Many diabetics say, okay, I've heard this before, but what does that mean in terms of my personal situation? This is exactly the right question to ask, and here's an example. Imagine if you're in a room with 30 people from various places with different backgrounds, and you start asking questions as simple as, what is a diet? What is Mexican food? What is healthy food? The answers you get from people in the room will most likely be varied depending on a variety of things, such as culture, how a person is raised, peer pressure, etc. But if we get back to the question of how this relates to each personal situation, you could consider an individual's food intake and discover what nutritional components are unnecessary, overabundant, or lacking. An additional consideration could be the individual's nutritional uptake, capabilities, or the ability to process nutrients efficiently. Some of our bodies are much more efficient than others at this. Part of addressing these areas has to do with a person's level of activity as well. When we look at the human body carefully, it doesn't take much to realize that it was designed to move. Keeping your body active increases circulation to deliver more oxygen, enhances nutrient uptake, and eliminates toxin. All of these considerations are particularly important for diabetics because of our inability to convert sugars into energy and the resulting toxic buildup that can occur in our systems. But unless you are a trained professional, it is very difficult to define personal exercise and nutrition needs that will achieve and sustain an improved health outlook. In today's show, we'll have the opportunity to talk with Brian Lehner, who will provide a professional perspective on what is involved in helping individuals to develop a realistic approach to nutrition and exercise. Brian's education is in kinesiology with an emphasis in fitness. He also holds certifications from National Strength and Conditioning Association as a strength and conditioning specialist and precision nutrition as a certified nutritionist. From Peninsula Television, this is Diabetes A1c Forum. We're here with certified fitness and nutrition expert Brian Lehner. Brian, welcome to Diabetes A1c Forum.
Hi, Pat. How's it going?
Good. Brian, you see bring clients in to instruct them how to get started and how to continue with nutrition and exercise programs, correct?
That is correct, Pat.
Okay, so if I'm a new client walking in the door for a first meeting with you, what does that client meeting consist of?
Well, Pat, the client meetings, usually the first one, it can vary, depends on the time frame that we set. Some clients are referred, and then I get a little bit of background information on them. But my goal usually is just to get to know them a little bit, see them, set some expectations of what the next couple visits might be, and take it from there.
Okay, so in the meeting, what do you want to take away from that meeting when you have the initial meeting with a client?
Usually the first meeting I have with the clients, I'm trying to figure out their goals, where they're coming from, anything they've done in the past that might not have worked or what has worked, because then that gives me the foundation to build their program moving forward for nutrition and for exercise as well.
Okay, so after you have that initial meeting with a client, when you're taking a look at the information that you've gotten from it, what process do you have to go through to determine the exercise and nutrition programs for that client?
I usually have them start with a couple of assessments, and they can be basic or pretty detailed depending on what their outcome is. I mean, the bigger the goal, the more I need to know. And basic exercise assessments just to see if they have any limitations or if I need to talk to their doctor. For example, would be a big one that's called RQ test. And that's before I even exercise with them or can take them on as a client. As far as nutrition goes, it can be as in-depth as what they have in their kitchen to what they eat with a food journal or anything of that sort.
When you present a nutritional program to your client, what does that usually consist of?
Usually when I'm doing nutrition programs with my client, I like to establish that everything's based off of healthy habits.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the cornerstone of my business, is building and maintaining the healthy habits for those individuals, and not tackling too many at one time and starting slow and building from there. So depending on their previous knowledge or education levels on nutrition, that depends on how in depth they go. It could go from as simple as eating to your 80% full, which is usually the first one I start with, to what their specific macro breakdowns might be if they're a higher end athlete that needs to really monitor all of that down to a T.
Could that include actual structured menus and that sort of thing, or actual specific types of food or food groups?
Oh, absolutely. It can usually down the road, we start with the simple habits and then we work our way to a more structured meal plan. Usually we don't need to get to that point until it's the last stubborn 5 to 10 pounds that most people struggle with at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the real structure comes in, and you need that foundation with all the other habits that lead up to it, though, to be able to stick to it and keep it sustained.
Now, do you have a process that you go through with your clients to determine what level of their commitment is to wanting to do a program and that sort of thing before you put a lot of time and effort into it?
Not necessarily. There's a kind of a myth out there that trainers should fire their clients if they're not a good fit or not take them on. I try to take on every client that I possibly can, just for the fact that there's responsibilities for the clients and for the trainer. So everybody starts off at a certain square, and that's kind of where the initial assessments come in to see which square we're starting in and how scaled back I either need to make the program or which type of program to give them. So I'm looking to build adherence on the program and sticking to the habits, and then we can build on there and keep moving it forward. So based on the responsibilities that come with the trainers, if I give you the wrong program and you follow it and you're not seeing results, then it's not necessarily the client's fault, it's my fault. Then that's where I need to take a step back and reevaluate my program that I gave you. Or if I know it's a program that works, maybe they're not adhering to it as much, and we need to work on a habit that'll help them stick to the program a little bit.
If you're suggesting a certain nutritional program to somebody, what role do nutritional supplements play in that?
Nutritional supplements are kind of a touchy subject for some people. Some people believe that everything needs to come from complete whole foods with zero supplementation. Others feel that they can't eat whole foods all the time and that supplements might help. Based on the assessments, usually it boils down to time, energy, and budget, sadly, but depending on what they're available to do, if they have unlimited resources, supplements could help you get to your goals faster and maintain it. But ultimately, the goal is to have everybody eating healthy and clean with no supplements down the road, unless they have a hormonal issue or something that we talk to about with their doctor that we need to address and use.
I'm constantly being told by people you should take this supplement or that supplement. That's interesting that you would approach it from that perspective, where you're just looking at mostly nutrition, just food and nutrition intake as opposed to supplements. So can you give some examples of some important exercise program components? Like, what are you looking for in the exercise program components?
Well, usually when I'm meeting with someone for the first time and explaining how the program works, exercise itself makes up a pretty good chunk. I started out as a personal trainer first and then got my nutrition certifications and moved forward from there, because that's a huge difference. So there's usually, I call it kind of the three-prong approach. Just like with the fire, we draw a triangle on a piece of paper. There, you need heat, oxygen, and fuel to have a fire be available. So kind of the heat part of that triangle is the strength training that comes into most programs.
Mm-hmm.
That can vary from, depending on what your goals are, to really heavy weights with light reps, or really high reps with light weight. It kind of depends, and that's where seeing a trainer really helps, narrowing down your training program depending on what you're training for in the long run.
So you're talking about, from your perspective, a pretty wide range, right? You're talking about from somebody who just wants to improve their health outlook to somebody who's a highly performing athlete. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I've worked the spectrum with high-level athletes, college, a couple professional athletes, all the way down. So some of my current clients are in their 90s right now, so they're just looking to stay moving and grooving.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be limited to with someone else just taking care of them. They want to be independent. So that's a big part of my training business also, is just the functional part,
mm-hmm.
all the way up to high performance to fat loss. I try to keep it to kind of those three things, but if someone comes to me with specific questions, I do my best to help them any way I can.
Are clients generally receptive to recommendations you give them right away, or does it take some work to get them to feel comfortable with what you're recommending?
Usually I haven't had too many problems with this, and that I kind of touched on it earlier, that the trainer is partly responsible for the program itself.
Mm-hmm.
I make this very clear when we start that it's not all on the client. So if they are not hitting milestones or goals that we set, then we take a step back and reevaluate and try and find the hurdles that are present for them, and then it's my job to help them overcome those hurdles.
So you mentioned healthy habits earlier. So, all of us over time, we develop certain habits with regard to multiple things. Exercise, nutrition are two areas that we do that too. So if you've got somebody who you're looking at a certain program from a nutrition or exercise perspective, do you find that there are habits that they have that are totally are counterintuitive to what you're trying to accomplish? And when you do, how do you deal with those?
Well, the first part is finding out which habits they have. So that's one of the initial assessments I conduct with people, is to kind of give me a broad spectrum idea of what habits they have throughout their life. There's a couple components that go into it. But yeah, some counterintuitive ones. Usually one is the popular one you see, and some people say, is you go to a fast food restaurant, you get a big meal, and then you order a Diet Coke. Yeah. I see that stuff like that a lot actually happens. And another one that I have for exercise is a lot of programs that people use to track their exercise online or things overestimate calories expended. Mm-hmm. And they're tracking the wrong things. So they'll track their walking at work versus actually walking for exercise. There's a different mindset you need to get into, and you need to set aside time just for exercise versus trying to knock two birds out with one stone. And then usually once we clear that up, then we start seeing where improvements can be made and where adjustments can be made.
We're talking about a process here. So this isn't like a 7 days you'll lose 20 pounds kind of thing.
No, it happens every once in a while. It just depends on kind of the commitment, and if we happen to get the exact program down right from the beginning, it could happen, but it's pretty rare. I'm looking for sustainability. I call it's a healthy life. You get one life. You don't just do it for a day or two. So you have to do it for a lifetime. That's why it's very important to maintain and keep moving forward with your goals and always setting new goals.
Yep. Makes sense. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being highly important, what kind of a role does family influence play in what you're trying to accomplish with a client?
It varies, but about 90% of the time it's at an 8 or higher, because usually that's the closest people to you, where you learn your habits from, who helps reinforce the habits you're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
So family is very big. I call it your center of influence, or your circle of influence, you can call it also. So it's kind of those 10 people you spend the most time with. Usually that's how your character kind of turns out and reflects a little bit of each one of them.
Could you give an example of how you would talk with a client about how they develop a circle of influence that's favorable to what they're trying to accomplish with your programs?
Yeah, no problem. Usually the first thing is you got the Lehner fitness family. Once you're working with me, we're all on the same page and we all have support each other and follow each other. So that's usually the first one I kind of let them be aware of, just in case the family isn't as supportive or the friends might not be as supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's making it very clear to your circle of influence what your intentions are and what you plan to get out of it. Because usually there's no communication there. And then that's where the big disconnect happens. And then you might be making someone mad that you don't know you're making mad, or you might be mad at them and they don't know. So usually establishing communication is key there, and just kind of getting everybody on the same page.
All right. That sounds good. It sounds like there's quite a bit of emotional influence there. And if you get that part right, it could make things a little bit easier in terms of being successful at following through with the programs you're recommending. So how do you connect your programs with clients' healthcare professionals?
That varies. If someone comes to me with a known condition, usually a couple of my initial assessments is a health history. There are some things that I need medical clearance to be able to provide training for. So usually that's how I find out. Or they kind of let me know in passing because they want to get started right away. And then I have to establish the connection with the doctor. Most of the time it's done through my client and doctor, and then I read the assessments that the doctors have, and if I have any questions, I can always contact the doctor, and so we can be on the same page and have an open dialogue.
So it depends on the client as to how often you're communicating with their healthcare professional?
Yeah, because some symptoms or problems that someone might have could be more severe, and we might need to check up constantly, where most of my clients, they just need to do a 1-year blood panel, and then we can see how they're progressing internally versus just the aesthetics appeal of it.
When you get information from the healthcare professional, do you actually derive metrics from the information that you get from the healthcare professional that help you to determine what kind of progress you're making on your programs?
Usually, that kind of comes from the healthcare professional. They'll tell me what the client really needs and what they need to work for, whether it's a healthy blood pressure, cholesterol level, and then that's on my radar, so we can kind of check up on that periodically to see if we're moving in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And then influences some of the exercise programs that we might have.
So when you're training a client in your facility, what kind of monitoring or measuring capabilities do you have there?
It depends. I train some clients at their homes. I also happen to work at a hospital as a personal trainer, so that kind of gives me a little leg up when I'm there. Mm-hmm. So we have body fat testers. I usually stick with pretty simple weight, girth, food logs, body fat. I can do body fat testing with either a handheld device or spin calipers, depending on the preference. And then just comparing it to the actual lab test done or blood work done, then that I can just make sure that everything makes sense and is moving in the same direction.
So as you gather all this data, how do you summarize nutrition, exercise, and healthcare data to your clients when you, I assume that there's a status update every so often with them?
Yeah, usually for most of my nutrition clients, we meet every 2 weeks and we update measurements. We go over food logs and we make sure everything's moving forward. With personal training itself, we're meeting a couple times a week, so there's always constant updates. And I do periodized approach to all the exercise programs, so we plan for improvement over a long period of time, usually the course of their program towards whatever goal it is. So there are steps, and it basically comes down to tracking. If you're not tracking the information, then you don't know what's going on. So that's where having a trainer kind of helps, because we can keep the records and kind of weed through anything to find hurdles or congratulate you if you're doing a good job.
What might a list of combined metrics look like that you would use to discuss this with a client? I mean, what would that include?
Most of my lists usually come with the strength increase, cardiovascular increase or decrease, depending on what they're doing or if they're adhering or the program's good or bad. But body composition is another one. Then, like I said previously, the blood profile, the lipid profiles, most of them are pretty standard measures. You can through like the American Council of Medicine and stuff like that, or National Strength and Conditioning Association. I kind of follow along those, and that gives us, I can add them to the database so they can see trends in fitness and just kind of the whole population as a whole once we're all networked together.
So when you look at a blood profile, what are you looking at?
Usually the blood profile will have, you start out fasted, you go in, you get your finger pricked, and then you can find your cholesterol, blood glucose levels. That's important usually, because people I work with are approaching pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetes. So that one's a big one that we like to see drop and decrease. Same with the cholesterol. We're looking for the high HDL, low LDL. And then that's kind of the main two. But sometimes one of my clients, she wasn't making progress, and we had a good program and she was adhering to it. So I sent her in, and we found out that she had a hormonal imbalance. So I asked her to get a little deeper check on her blood profile, and we found that out. And working with her physician, we were able to correct it and switch up a medication she was on. And then all of a sudden progress started happening. So we were happy to have that happen.
Interesting. If we go back to habits, obviously a lot of habits people have been developed over long periods of time. What does it, just for viewers' benefit, what are we talking about in terms of changing habits with people that they have, and maybe getting rid of bad habits and replacing those with good or healthy habits? What can people expect at a minimum that they have to work on making those kinds of changes in their life?
Well, I like to keep it pretty simple. We work usually one habit at a time. So like I said, with most of my nutrition clients, every 2 weeks, I'll try and implement a new habit depending on their adherence to the habits. So after about a 2-week span, if we work on it every day, then usually it kind of sticks. And most of the habits, once you kind of start using the good habits, the bad habits kind of fall to the wayside. So ideally, I'd like to work with a client for about a year. There's 26 habits then if we're meeting every 2 weeks and we continue to make progress. So just 26 habits make a huge impact over the course of a year on body composition, how you feel, blood profiles. And it's just amazing how it works. And that's kind of the slow, continued progress that keeps happening.
Yeah, that's pretty helpful for viewers to understand that, this isn't kind of like a short overnight thing, that it's a process that you have to go through to manage these things and to actually see the improvements that you're looking for. Well, Brian, we're running out of time here, so why don't you let people know if they're in the San Diego area, how they might get a hold of you if they're interested in talking to you about starting a program.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I do have a website. It's LehnerFitness.com, Lehner fitness.com, and you can email me at brian@LehnerFitness.com. And I also do online coaching, so if there's anybody up in your neck of the woods that's also interested, they're more than welcome to shoot me an email, and I can set up a program over Skype like we're doing here or on the phone. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. And Yeah, shoot me an email anytime.
All right, Brian, well, thanks for joining us on Diabetes A1c Forum. As you can see from today's discussion, there's a lot to consider when it comes to managing physical activity and nutrition to improve health outlook. A proper nutrition and exercise program not only varies with each individual, but requires an extra level of monitoring when diabetes is involved. This is why it is extremely important to enlist the help of an expert such as Brian, who knows how to balance exercise and nutrition goals with recommendations from healthcare professionals. An added advantage to enlisting a professional to get you started with a proper exercise and nutrition program is the regular monitoring of current physical status, progress, and results. This provides a way to measure the effectiveness of each individual's efforts with regard to actually improving health outlook. As always, please join my blog at www.diabetesa1cforum.org and comment on today's show. I look forward to your feedback. Thanks for watching Diabetes A1c Forum, and I'll see you next time.